ones later, and ones that you're watching on YouTube tomorrow. So I'm just adding some standoffs in here. Normally I would do these with inserts, but I didn't get these milled. And so I'm just going to screw the standoffs into these wood holes that I drilled with my drill press. Hope that I get them. I'll probably go back and glue them in later, just to make sure they're nice and solid. I'm actually considering moving to this on a regular basis because those inserts are really kind of a pain to put in. So considering moving to just epoxying these standoffs in place instead. I think I drilled these holes just a hair too small, so it's going to make it a little difficult. Maybe if I use just press them down in here a little bit. So, between this week and last, I didn't get a whole lot done on the case. This is one of those things, that's the way it kind of goes. I did manage to get the case shaped, sanded, but I have not done the final sanding and applied the finishing, just kind of a rough sanding. Now we're picking up some viewers. Hello everyone, just putting in some standoffs here. Again, this is not how this was originally going to be done. I had to drill these holes with my drill press because I forgot to put them on there in the first place. So, this is what you do when you prototype. You improvise. Use the bigger drill bit and just glue them in. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'll do my best to check over there and get them answered as I'm going. I've been thinking about what keycaps to put on this. Kind of only have one or two options. That most of my sets are ortho sets, so I believe I have a set of. I believe I have enough of the right keycaps in my it's a die-sub PBT Dolch set, BSA. Bought it off Meg Market. I'm pretty sure it's one KBD fan sells. It's not the greatest or the nicest set, but it does work acceptably. And it has pretty good coverage. I currently have it on another board that has some odd-sized keys, and it has almost everything you need. I'm hoping it'll have enough for this HHKB layout. Almost done. Now then, we've got the board we put together last couple weeks. I guess that was last week. Honestly, don't know where this week went. It's been a busy one. So we're going to take out all these switches because we got to put the plate in. So we're going to have to undo all this. It is not a very tight hold with these hot swap sockets, but they make. I haven't ever had any problems on the few boards that I've had so far. So I don't think there's any problem with using them. You just gotta make sure everything's secured. And of course, if you don't have PCB mount switches, since you're using KLE here, we obviously don't. Then you know, kind of out of luck there. All right, find some. I need short screws because these are only 3mm standoffs. I got to make sure I use some pretty short screws. Let's see if these will work. I'm afraid they're 5mm, and that's going to be just a hair too long. But actually, excuse me. Because we're using this plate, we need another standoff. Because this is hot swap, the way we designed this, we're going to stack a standoff on top of this plate. So we're doing standoffs in the bottom, PCB, and then more standoff. And then we're going to put the plate on. Because I wasn't probably super precise when I drilled these holes, they're having trouble lining up. We'll get them there. Also doesn't help that these things are so tiny. Obviously, if I would have done these with the CNC, they would have been very precise and I wouldn't have this problem. But this is why we prototype. Yeah, missed a hole there. Hopefully that won't be a problem. had to get to. Okay, so because I wanted to prototype this as if this were a metal plate, I went ahead and had a 1.5 millimeter plate made. That is super duper thin. I'm going to have to be real careful not to crack it. And obviously this is probably not the best choice for a hot swap board because you do want to be able to take your sockets in and out, your switches in and out. So yeah, I think the string layout is correct. I just don't have the video maximized. I didn't have anything to put up there. And I will have all these videos up on YouTube. I didn't get the first 2 weeks I believe are up. The last 2 weeks are not. I actually didn't get all of the CNC footage captured for some reason. I need to go back and check YouTube and see, but for some reason it didn't all get captured. But all of the kind of important stuff is there. The rest of it is just boring stuff, watching the CNC go around. So all the part where I actually designed the cam layouts and all that stuff, I definitely have, and that'll be up on YouTube. I just haven't had a chance to go back through everything. Been super busy the last couple of weeks. Trying to get stuff done on this and my other projects, and then of course my full-time job and wife and kids and all that. I really enjoyed the article that Baking Pie wrote a few weeks ago, talking about a day in the life of a keyboard vendor. It was very very familiar to me, and hopefully kind of enlightening to some of the rest of y'all about how much work actually is involved in trying to run really a kind of a small business of any kind that is particular to the keyboard. Can y'all hear me all right if I'm talking like this, or do I need to adjust the microphone? Okay, got that side clear. Probably the most annoying part of this whole thing is getting all this plastic off. No, paper off the plastic. This plate is clear, which is going to be kind of nice with the RGB underglow. We'll let it shine up through the plate, and then I've got a piece for the top. It was designed to be brass, but couldn't get the brass cut in time, so I've got an acrylic stand-in for that, which is also clear, which will be interesting. I've got a piece of another version of it on the way that's going to be it's acrylic, but it looks like the green glass. I saw it on a board at the last meetup I was at, and it looks like I thought it was glass at first. I had to look at it several times, and then I still didn't really believe it was glass. It wasn't glass, but it's just acrylic. So I'm getting the top piece made in that. That's a 3mm thick material. I think that'll look really cool on this. Oh, I gotta get stabilizers. Almost forgot. I got over that. Used to build ortho boards, and I don't need to worry about stabilizers. Whew. Okay. That is going to go in here like this. And we'll put the stabilizers in before we get it all put in. So I gotta grab those. Okay. Stabilizers. They're one of the 3 classic blunders. So what are the other 2? You tell. Oh, I should 2. So I could do a split spacebar. I think since I'm not sure I have the keycaps for that, I'm going to go ahead and just do a normal spacebar. So pretty much stock, typical HHKB style layout. Oh, yeah. Okay. Clip stabilizers. I would ordinarily lube them, but since I'm since I can always take it apart later, I'm not gonna mess with it right now because I don't know where my lube is. Unless it's right here. It's not. So we'll go no lube on the stabilizers. No Band-Aid mod, none of that stuff. That's the nice thing about the hot swap socket cells. You can always go back and add that stuff if you wanted to without having to desolder the entire board. I just have to look at these, figure out which way they're going. Because like I said, I don't know what we're doing. Yeah, we got them backwards. I worried there for a second when my stab didn't fit. Well, uh-oh. Oh! I designed this for a 7U spacebar, and this is not a 7U stabilizer. Okay. So since I don't have a 7U stab, we will go split spacebar layout, because I now have those. In that case, I'm going to need a total of 4. I think I did the stabilizer wrong. Told you I never do these. Called ortho boards. That's better. Okay. Yep. So does anybody have any questions so far about this whole series? About anything? Something you saw, something you didn't see, something you wanted to see? Put some music on. Oh, the sockets are they're the KLE hot swap sockets. They're soldered to the PCB, which is upside down at the moment. I had one sitting here. Here's what the sockets look like. They're little bitty, like things. They surface mount solder to the bottom of the PCB, and then these pins are going to stick into them. So the PCB does have to be designed to use these, and that's what we did in the first video. You know what, I think I put these all together wrong too. Oh, those are right. This one's wrong. Now, if we can get through the stabilizers and we can get through putting the keys in without cracking the acrylic, then I'll call this a win. I know there is the new plank is going to have hot swap sockets as an option. The two versions of the PCB, one with hot swap sockets, and there is a new Let's Split coming out that has hot swap sockets. I've got some stuff coming out with hot swap sockets eventually. Hopefully there'll be a lot more. It does eliminate a lot of the headache with soldering and desoldering that people like to do. I'm not sure why they like to. I cannot stand desoldering. Nope. One more. Got it in wrong. This is going to be hard to get out too. I need to get a hot swap socket for the big switch. If you didn't see, I got launched my rest of my cases, the whole lineup. Got two, 3, 4 version switch wood cases, along with the one switch, and I've got some aluminum ones out as well, the 1U, and some limited edition brass. It's going to be buffed to a high polish mirror finish. That's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about that. So there's only going to be 10 of those made. If you want one of those, you better hop on them up. Already 3 of them are gone. And it's only been open since this afternoon. That's what's forget. Okay, most of the screws I have are going to be too long. Let's dig over here. Aha. Here we go. So I bought a lot of these kits on Amazon, little laptop screws, various sizes. So I've got some 3 and 4 millimeter M2 screws. I think these 3 millimeter will work, so I'm going to use them. That is a lot of brass. 3 pounds of brass, in fact. I was hoping to have a lot of brass on here. That was the plan for this board, and I'm still planning to get that done. I got some quotes out for it, waiting on my local water jet guy to get back to me. I think we can make it work fairly cost effective. I missed a screw right here. I'm hoping it's not going to have too much. It's definitely going to make the board flex a little more than I wanted it to. Have to get that standoff put back in there at some point. Obviously on the ones where they get machined, those will be in there. So I think I may have mentioned it at least once before on the stream, but if you are interested in buying this board, after the stream's over, I'm going to have a page up with these available for sale. I'm going to have the 10 prototype boards with custom-made cases, and then you know, if that goes well, if people are interested in it, I'm going to have some get some quotes to get these made. Okay, so this is kind of what I was afraid might happen here. Because this plate's so flexible, it's difficult to get these switches in. I have to hold it up. Yeah, that's it. That's there we go. So I'm going to try to get these corners in. The corners, yeah, see, a little too much flex in the PCB. This one would go well with a nice stiff plate, but just couldn't get it done in time. Once you get a few in, though, it is working pretty well. One thing that I've been working with on these hot swap boards with Jordy over at Joe Limon over at Strata Keyboard, he's got some foam, some high density foam that goes in between here, in between the PCB and the acrylic layer, and those bent the pin. That's not good. Yeah, you do have to make sure you get the pin straight, or you do bend them. So with that foam in the middle, it does a couple of things. It dampens the sound, obviously, but then it also provides that extra rigidity between the plate and the PCB, so when you're snapping these in, it doesn't cause problems. It doesn't flex as much. But thus far, I'm pretty happy with this acrylic. The way it's working here. The way I've got these standoffs in here holding it up. Even with the limited number of standoffs I have, it's working pretty well. I say that, I'm gonna up here on the top edge. Then you want to go in. That's in. Didn't hear it click. There, that's click. One thing about these standoffs is the standoffs are 3 millimeters. And really they need to be 3.5. So I think maybe that's why these ones next to the screws are not clipping in quite right. I am thus far very happy with these plates. If you're watching, Jordy, excellent job. I think this is a very viable solution here. This corner with the blockers in it. I should have put some supports underneath the corner of the plate. And then get my. There we go. Use my handy tweezers. Likewise here on the bottom where you got this space bar cut out. I got one of those layouts for this plate from the Swill keyboard builder. I really don't need this cutout. That's for a plate mount stabilizer to be able to get the wire in. So I could actually lose this cutout here and get a little more stability. Definitely be doing that in the future. Now we're on the home stretch. And the nice thing is that when we're done, we don't have to go back and solder the switches. We're just done. It's some keycaps on, and this board will be ready to rock and roll. Didn't even lose a switch. How about that? Okay, now I gotta find some keycaps. This will be a little more interesting. Sorry, I dumped some screws out here. I can't see this, but I'm trying to pick these screws up and put them back in this bag. Try to keep some semblance of clean on my desk, even though it's not the easiest thing to do. I had a switch that didn't get clipped in good, obviously. Couple of them there. Yeah, it's really missing this standoff here by the spacebar. This really flexible here, but other than that, maybe some in the corners. Pretty rigid. You know what? Let's see if this JTK set has enough keys to fit this board. I think that's right. It actually has a 7U spacebar. I have most of the keys on another board, so we'll pull those off. If you haven't seen this board teased on Instagram, probably, this is a new custom board I did. It's actually a diffuser. It's just got a piece of paper on it as well. This is kind of cool, powder coated. Yes, these are violets, Eiffel violets. Now I have to find a keycap puller. All right. JTK or BSA Gulch. Gotta vote for JTK. Just go JTK, I guess. I can figure out what to do with my keycap puller. Telling you, this week's been crazy, so my desk is just covered in keyboard parts, and I haven't had time to clean up. In case you were wondering, they do make hot swap sockets for the KL chocks, low profile switches. Excuse me. There it is. There we go. This is a shine through cap. I don't have any LEDs on here, so I'm not going to bother with that. Put something else there. Need to get some more key sets. Well, thanks, Lockmaster. Something I developed for kind of as a custom for that one Oscar. He wanted something kind of futuristic looking, so this is what I came up with. Kind of took some inspiration from the curves on the Eiffel Tower, so I called it the Eiffel 60. Me not being a pop fan, I didn't realize that there was actually a band called the Eiffel 65. If I had, I might have actually designed this to be a 65% board. Oh yeah, before I forget, I do have this other inlay piece here. I'll pull the. I didn't get the holes drilled for it, but I will pull the plastic off here in a little bit, and we'll stick that on there just to kind of get a visual. But I'll have to go back and drill those holes. But this is how I did the blockers. This was kind of my solution. And again, I intend for this piece to be made out of brass, but I'll have to get that cut at a later time. I'm pretty sure when I was putting these keys on here the other day, I do remember seeing all of the ones I need for the HHKB layout, so hopefully they're in there. I believe that this is the right profile control. Nope, not the right size. One thing there, if you saw that, the switches do have a tendency to come up when you pull them off. So you gotta watch out for that. I think if you had a nice metal plate with good tight tolerances, that probably won't be as big of an issue. One thing about the switches though is that because those clips are made out of real thin plastic, the more you take them on and put them off, because you have to squeeze those in to pull them out, the more they're likely to not clip as tight. So kind of unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes. You know, 175 shift. I'm sure I have somewhere. So one thing I had planned on doing on this series was finishing the case, doing the sanding, doing the putting the oil on, whatever kind of top coat, shellac or lacquer or whatever. Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, not having the right equipment in the right places, setting up in the shop to do that has not been, well, for one thing, my shop is not very set up at the moment. But I don't have a lot of extra space, so, oh no. Oh, sorry. I should have known that, because this is an arrow key layout. That's supposed to be an arrow key there. So hopefully at a later time I'll be able to do maybe a little mini series on doing some wood finishing on these cases, kind of what my process is. It's really evolved a lot over the last year that I've been doing this, but I do have some techniques I can share. So I think I'm going to have to use these shift keys. As split space keys here. Let's see. Flip the layout over here and see what I got on it. Messages over there. Oh. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I don't have this set up to show you right now. If you refer back to one of the other layouts, I can show you you can see what I'm looking at. I'll link it here in the chat. Oh, no, I won't, because it's on a different screen. I'll have the chat up. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I actually need 2 of the 275, and I don't think I have them, so unfortunately this is not going to be quite covered. That's the control I need. I'd intended to probably buy some custom keys from SP. Get a set to put on this. One of those things that didn't have time to follow through on. There's my shift key. I'm going to go with this cherry key up here. Hopefully you're still seeing this. Move this one out of the way now that it's done. Got what I needed off of it. See if I can rearrange what we're looking at here. There you go. Now you can almost see the whole board, like this way. Okay, I got a 1U over here. Alt key there. This is going to be a 1.5 in the middle. Let's see what I got in here. There's my HHKB backspace. Have to go with whatever I can find that fits at the moment. Now I remember seeing the backslash. There it is. And normal size left shift here. Keep it here. And this looks like the biggest key I have left, so we're going to stick it on there. Need some little blockers and then we'll be good. We got the right side out. Okay. So I promised we were going to put this top piece on. And get the acrylic peeled back, and then the protective coating peeled back off the acrylic. This one will be a lot easier than the plate was. Oh, this is not clear. This is, I think, maybe it's clear. For a minute there I thought it was frosted. Okay. Has some really cool looking frosted stuff with it. I got. Actually, that diffuser in the bottom of that other case is frosted. And it is very cool. It's not just frosted on the surface, it's frosted the whole way through. And so even though it's been laser cut, still shows frosted on the sides. Almost looks a little frosted. It's not all the way clear. See, I think. Uh-oh. I'm afraid that because of the way I drilled those holes manually, I didn't get this shifted into the right location. Got too much interference right here. You get some gapping over here. So unfortunately I'm not going to be able to use it with the, yeah, you can't see that on camera. I'm not going to be able to use it on the here without making some adjustments to the mount points, which I'll do. Again, that's all because I forgot to CNC those. So probably what I'll do is just make a different case. I mean, this is what happens when you're prototyping. That's why I like to try to do more than one at a time. I already plan on doing more than one. I do one, and then, you know, if I'm doing a custom build, I don't just do the one that I'm planning on sending to a customer. The USB cable, which is on the side over here. Again, this is kind of unique, but I did it this way for a couple of reasons. One, because it was convenient when I was laying out the PCB. I don't know if you heard that, but it does have a speaker in it. So you can play the little chip tunes and stuff when you start it up and when you do other events. So I'm going to push my keyboard back over here. Slide this around maybe. That's not too bad. I have no idea what's programmed to what. That's the only problem. And I can't type on ortho. I mean staggered. My Y key's not working. It's really hard to type keyboard. So, a couple reasons why the Y key might not be working. I'm going to guess it's because it got a switch pin bent. That's been the case almost always when I've had a switch on one of these hot swap boards not work. Because I did have it working the other day, so I know that it is possible that it... okay. This little plastic holder, or switch puller, is terrible. So it's a really neat little idea. You got Keycap puller on this end, switch puller on that end. It's really not good at either one. So, but I was thinking, because this other one wouldn't fit in there. What does that mean? Shift. That's an interesting place for shift. Let's send in key codes. What if I just don't have this programmed right? That one's sending nothing. Oh, that's right. I remember doing this the other day. So I mapped these two keys. I'll pull up the firmware editor here in a minute. I mapped these two keys to raise and lower, which they go to a layer that doesn't actually exist in the key map. So they put QMK into this really weird state where it doesn't know what key codes to send. That's not the problem with this switch, however. And this is actually not a bent one either. Okay. Must be a bad solder joint on the bottom. So I'm going to have to take the whole thing apart to get to that. But I'll do that at a later time. I'll pull up the QMK key map and show you what I'm talking about here. So we're going to switch over to this screen. Look at that. All right. So I put in raise and lower, which do a this is all kind of copied from a Let's Split layout, I'm sure. So I know people don't really type like this in HHKB, but so So I need to define these layers in order to get this back to functional. Or I could just change those to something else. But and so here's, of course, the other thing that I didn't do was put a reset. Always put a reset in your layout. I didn't do that. So I had this really cool idea that I saw somewhere, where instead of putting the reset button on the bottom where you have to drill a hole in the case, they put the reset button on the top, where in theory, if you had a hole in the plate, you could just stick, let's see, I'm going to click over here where you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go over here, okay? So I put the reset button right here in between these two switches, except I did two things. Didn't do two things. I didn't actually mount the reset button, and I didn't cut a hole in the plate for the reset button. So that's going to make it really difficult to reset. But we're going to see what we can do. I'm gonna attempt something here. See, now if I just had this in my key map, it wouldn't be a big deal. So if I could take this switch out, I might really get my handy. Haha! So I don't think you could see what I was doing, but I managed to get my tweezers up under, let's see if I can kind of show it up there. I managed to get my tweezers up under here and press that reset, press the pads for that reset button that's right over there. So obviously I'm going to need to get that reset button mounted. I'm going to need to get the hole in the design file so that I can get that cut in the plate. But in the meantime, I got it to work. Another one there. So What's the reset button for? Yes, the reset button is for flashing the firmware. You need to reset it to put it into the bootloader mode. That's how the firmware, that's how the microcontroller works. Ah, that one did bend the pin. So this looks like the one that I bent, and I think that I may have bent it beyond recognition. I don't know if you ever looked real closely, one of these pins is real stiff and solid, and the other one is thinner and it's made out of copper, but it's actually made out of 2 sheets of real thin copper that are stuck up against each other and sandwiched in there. And if you bend it too much, then those kind of separate and then they don't work. I do have a couple of extra of these switches if I knew what I did with them. Well, see if I can get it in here. Nope. See if you can see if I can hold it here. Focus on this camera is terrible. Let me try it up here. I don't know if you can see, but it has basically split the pin. Try to crimp it back on itself, but it's probably not going to work. Yeah, it looks like that socket may have actually gotten pushed off the bottom. So, Laughmaster, if you don't use QMK, what have you used in the past for firmware? At this point, what I'm going to do is pull all of the keycaps back off because I need to pull all of the switches off in order to remove this plate. That is a little bit unfortunate the way I built the plate with those standoffs. I can't take the PCB out of the case without removing all the switches. So one of the other mounting options looking at, okay, yeah, I mean if you're using auto hotkey or whatever, then yeah, that's a little different. Just doing it all in software on your computer. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this board. So occasionally you will pull the entire switch out with the keycap. But for the most part, these are hanging in here, which is good. These two over in this corner, they didn't work very well, but for the most part, the ducky boards are programmed with Bootmapper client, aren't they? I've never used a ducky board, so I'm not sure. Pretty much every firmware. I mean, there's ways around that. Like QMK really should have a function where it can tell the flasher can tell the firmware to reset itself into bootloader mode. There's some other firmwares out there that are possible, but right now I'd say QMK is definitely the most feature-rich in terms of all the different things you can do with audio and RGB and backlighting. And it definitely is focused a little more for programmers than non-programmers. But there's lots of people out there that are trying to work on that. I think a lot of the people that like the programmable boards are people that have to use different boards, different computers, I mean, well, and different boards, but so to be able to have the same functionality on a different computer without having to reinstall software. We're just going to go through the whole process here. We assembled it, now we're going to disassemble it. So one of the other options we've been discussing when for mounting these is if you have that foam layer, rather than having these screw-in standoffs in between, what I'm looking at is to have just a nylon spacer that is the same, that is the right thickness. So if it's a 2mm gap, if you're using an acrylic 3mm top plate, then it would be a 2mm gap. You use a 2mm thick spacer. If it's a 1.5 like I've got here for either acrylic or metal plate, then you'd use a 3.5mm spacer, because the important dimension is the distance from the top of the plate to the top of the PCB. That's 5mm according to the Cherry spec. And so you got to have that spacing maintained. So what we're looking at is if you put a spacer in between the plate and the PCB to maintain that dimension, and then use the foam to actually hold the spacer in place, then you can just use a long screw from the top of the plate into the standoffs below the PCB. You don't have to screw the standoff to the case and then screw the PCB to the plate. So kind of eliminate the problem I've got here where I have to take every switch out and remove the plate, and then remove those standoffs, and then remove, well, and then I can take the PCB out. So screwdriver. Story of my life, always looking for the tools. That's the wrong. Oh, there it is. And I'll definitely go in and put this other standoff in. I'm going to have to re-drill that hole, but I won't put this back together on the stream, but I am going to troubleshoot what's wrong with this socket. Which, again, is probably a bad solder joint, which probably won't happen on a production board. Okay, light comes out. Now I gotta take all these standoffs out. Also need to make those adjustments I was talking about to the position of the standoffs so that that top blocker plate fits. Okay, hey look, that's exactly what happened. A bad solder joint and the whole socket popped off. And I had a problem with the Y. Yeah, that one looks like a bad solder joint as well right here. I'm going to spin this back over here and flip on my soldering iron. So the nice thing about these sockets is they are very easy to hand solder with regular solder. You don't need solder paste. I did put these on originally with solder paste. I'm kind of thinking for future ones I'm probably not going to do that. I'm probably just going to put them on with solder, so that I don't have to worry about stuff like this, because you can really put a lot of solder on these to hold them in place really well, make a good joint. Fortunately, I was paying attention to which ones popped off. Soldering these is pretty much just as easy as soldering switches onto a PCB. I should probably just go reinforce all of these and then I don't have to worry about it. I think this is one of the complaints about the XD75 was that some of the sockets would pop off. Solder paste is what you use for, well, it's typically used for surface mount soldering. It's a paste that's it's got solder suspended into in flux, so it's kind of solder and flux all in one, made into a little paste. I'm going to reinforce this USB connector as well. Probably get heat for that. of these. These pin pads, I guess you call them, on the sockets are like a little U-shaped trough kind of thing, and they just soak up the solder and hold. They make a good, nice joint. So the way solder paste works is you put it onto the PCB, and I'll have that video up. You can go back and watch it probably by tomorrow. You use a stencil, you put the paste on, and it covers all the pads where there's going to be surface mount components, and then you place the surface mount components, and then you put and then you heat it, and you reflow the solder. So you heat everything up, it melts all the solder and attaches everything to the PCB. So that the reason in my mind, that's the reason why these sockets were created, was so that they could easily surface mount the switches. So you can't normally solder the switches. They normally have to be done by hand. So they created these sockets that can withstand this automated soldering processes, whether that's wave soldering or reflow soldering. Wave soldering is a whole other thing. You can go Google some videos on that. It's pretty interesting. It's actually got a molten solder wave that passes over and just solders stuff in place. Pretty fascinating. I got my iron a little bit too hot here, but I'm going fast. And again, this is not something you should typically have to do on a production board. Kind of a one-time thing because I didn't do a good job of reflowing it. Probably didn't get enough solder on there, and my solder paste was a little old. So like I was saying, I think the main benefit to these sockets for kind of the OEM customers that KL would cater to is that they can solder these as part of their normal SMD assembly process, and then it's really easy for an assembly line to just snap the switches in, and possibly even they could get a robot to do it, versus having to solder switches all by hand, which I believe is what they would have had to been doing before. They might have been able to use robotic soldering. I don't think they can wave solder switches. So I think the whole motivation behind these is not for the enthusiast community to swap switches in and out, but for OEM customers to build boards more efficiently. I could be wrong. That's just kind of my take on it, why they exist. Okay. That's it. All soldered in place. Now we should never have any more problems with the sockets on this board. Again, I'll have to go back and re-drill that other thing, make some adjustments to these to kind of push them over into that corner a little bit more so that the blocker plate will fit on the top up here. But okay, so I think I'm going to call that the stream tonight.